We are a not-for-profit community effort dedicated to making open research work. Our goals are to help our main stakeholders of publishers, institutions, and funders enhance the value of their open research. We work to spotlight research objects like preprints, like we're going to talk about today, articles, data sets, software, user facilities, etc. We work with our stakeholders to improve the overall quality of their metadata related to open research, and we host forums and workshops like today's forum, to connect our stakeholders so they can learn and hopefully build trust and integrity together. So now I'm going to pass over to Katie Corker from ASAP Bio to kick us off.
All right, thanks, Howard. I'm delighted to welcome you all here today for this webinar. We've got a panel of great experts here with different vantage points in the preprints ecosystem. We are going to start with some brief remarks from our panelists. And each of the panelists to sort of kick us off is going to address the question of sort of what is the preprint service that they represent? How does that preprint service sort of fit into the broader preprints ecosystem? And I'm hoping, Tara, that we have the slides in the order that they're listed here. So I think Dawn is going to be going first. Yes. Welcome, Dawn from TechRxiv and IEEE.
Thanks, Katie. So I do represent TechRxiv at IEEE, and if you can move to the next slide, please. I am Dawn Melley. I'm a Senior Director of Publishing Operations at IEEE, which means that I oversee publishing services for all of our periodicals, conferences, and books through a team of 100 professionals who support our researchers through the entire process: editorial production, indexing, and digital content services. Our emphasis, you may not be surprised to hear, is on technology, implementing technology in our workflows, and also, of course, continuous improvement. I personally also serve as the publisher of Proceedings of the IEEE, our flagship journal, IEEE Access, our multidisciplinary open access journal, and IEEE Press, our book publishing program. I've been at IEEE for over 25 years. I'm in my 26th year, and I've been in STM publishing for 40 years. Next. So for those of you who aren't familiar with IEEE, just a little bit of a quick fact sheet here. We're the world's largest professional association with over 500,000 members in more than 160 countries. IEEE is a complicated internal structure of 46 societies and technical councils, so organized in technical fields of interest, and then also geographically organized into 10 worldwide geographic regions. We publish nearly a third of the world's technical literature in our fields of interest, sponsor over 2,000 conferences annually, are a leading developer of international standards, and are very much led by a diverse body of elected and appointed volunteer members. Next. The size of our portfolio, you'll see here, we have 197 journals this year, 52 magazines, and over 1,300 books. Last year, we published over 300,000 conference papers, and right now, TechRxiv, the reason for my presence here today, hosts over 19,000 preprints. Next. So TechRxiv, the launch of TechRxiv was driven by strategy. We launched in September 2019 in response to a strategic plan developed by our publications board. TechRxiv was developed as a free service for those working in engineering, computer science, and related technologies. IEEE membership is not required to use TechRxiv. And the goal for TechRxiv was to expand the content types in an author's R&D lifecycle that are in IEEE publications by beginning our relationship with an author further forward in the research lifecycle, so at an earlier point in the process. And this benefits IEEE, of course, by supporting our desire to capture as much content produced in our fields of interest as possible. And a preprint server could be integrated with the submission process for journals and conferences, making it easy for an author to stay with IEEE as their research matures. Next. TechRxiv, this is the landing page that you see here, as of the 1st of June 2026, has had over 17 million views, 7 million downloads, and as I mentioned, over 19,000 preprints. I believe that's all from me, so thank you all, and looking forward to the discussion.
That's great. Thanks so much, Dawn. All right, we are going to move along to our second panelist, Ben Mudrak from the American Chemical Society, representing ChemRxiv.
All right, yeah, thank you so much. You can go to the next slide and we'll dive right in. So an overview of ChemRxiv. Some of this will sound pretty familiar. The idea here is it's a preprint service that's focused on chemistry and related fields. We launched in August of 2017, and I think I have some stats on the next slide, so we'll hold on for that. But wanted to mention that we recently moved technology platforms. That's something I think Katie mentioned we might get back to in the discussion later. But you can see a screenshot there as well. We have around 40,000 unique preprints posted now, and something that I like to point out about ChemRxiv is, well, I do work at the American Chemical Society, and that's where operations sits for ChemRxiv. We are also supported by 4 other chemical societies: the Royal Society of Chemistry, the German, Chinese, and Japanese chemical societies. So it is a collaborative effort and sort of an international initiative. All right, you can go to the next slide. We may come back to this as well, but certainly we've been seeing growth. I think everyone's been seeing growth across the board, sort of in terms of publishing output. We're on pace for, I think, I wrote over 11,500 preprints this year, which would be a 20% year-over-year increase. So we're starting to see even an increase over the trend of the last few years. And we can talk about, I think, some of the reasons why that might be as well when we get to the discussion. You can go to the next slide. So we set up ChemRxiv as a free submission, distribution, and archive service for these unpublished drafts in chemistry. And I will say, similarly to what Dawn mentioned, this was seen as a strategic importance to serve the chemistry community. We had seen the success of bioRxiv, medRxiv, who are participating here as well today, and realized that there was benefit for a portion of our community there as well. So the idea here is just to give authors a chance to control the timeline of release of their own new findings. So they want to be able to rapidly share something, establish priority for a new discovery, and document these in a way that is going to be permanently recorded and they can mention in their reports and things like that. And then, of course, on the flip side, it allows for our researchers to stay on top of the very latest in research, even if it hasn't been peer reviewed yet, and they may need to view it a little more critically. They can use it in their study design and discussions sooner than waiting for the journal article. You can go to the next slide. I think, I don't know if we'll get back to this as well. I did want to mention a little bit about the screening process that we undertake at ChemRxiv. Early first round, so something is looked at by someone with a chemistry PhD, every single preprint that we receive. And the first thing they're looking for really is just, is it a complete article? We run it through some checks for plagiarism, or if it's already been published, which we won't post. But then at that point, they're really just looking to see, is it truly scientific in nature? Does it fit the manuscript types that we post, which are just a regular full-length research article or a review? And then does it fit very broadly within chemistry and related fields? And we try to be pretty inclusive on that front. But we do, we do have a scope. If you want to go to the final slide. Okay, I thought just in thinking through maybe being a little transparent about what we sort of see as the challenge for running a preprint service like ChemRxiv, we're trying to maintain a balance. We want to help people share research as quickly as possible for all the reasons that I mentioned before. But with it, we do want to undertake some screening, some as best we can, without it being peer review. So this is not screening for minute errors within the subject, but is there something that is truly potentially harmful or unscientific, completely unscientific? And this is definitely becoming increasingly challenging, especially as AI enables researchers to produce content very rapidly. I think that's it from me, Howard. Yeah, great. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ben. All right, so we have 2 more preprint servers to learn a little bit about. We're next going to have Kelly Cohen from the Optical Publishing Group to tell us about Optica Open.
Great. Thank you very much, Katie. Yes, I am Kelly Cohen, Senior Publisher with Optica Publishing Group, and we're the publishing division of Optica, which is a professional society advancing the science of light. About our publishing program, we do have a portfolio of 13 peer-reviewed journals and a member magazine. And then we also host 6 partner journals and distribute additional journals on our platform. Today, I am representing our preprint server, Optica Open. Unlike multidisciplinary repositories, Optica Open is an optics and photonics field-centered destination for discovery and visibility. And we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So we are fairly new to the landscape of preprint servers. We just launched 3 years ago, January 2023. And our focus in launching the preprint server was to continue serving the needs of our community and showing our support for open science in general. We use Figshare as our hosting platform. And that was an easy choice because we were already working with Figshare to host the supplementary material for our journals. We feel that a key benefit and distinguishing factor for Optica Open is that it is closely integrated with our journals. So the authors can easily choose to post their manuscript to the preprint server immediately after submitting to one of our journals. We do have the screening process, of course, and it's conducted by some contracted subject matter experts with some support from Optica staff in responding to general questions, policies, and procedures. The submissions do go through Authenticate for plagiarism detection. We, firstly look for scope. Does it fit within the optics and photonics, topic field? Is it scientific in nature? Does it look like any elements are missing where it would make the preprint difficult to understand? And checking, are there any copyright or permissions issues that may need to be addressed? Those are the things that we also look for the journal papers. And even though preprints are not peer-reviewed, we feel it's important to check for those things too. We also check for, we have to look at the sanctions list, and we've been recently looking more closely at preprints that are single authors, and if there's large citation blocks. These are things that might come up a little bit further in our conversation today. As optics, it's a subdiscipline of physics. So the archive is already extremely popular in our community. And when we were launching Optica Open, we didn't expect authors to suddenly abandon archive and begin posting their papers to Optica Open. But there are some, classical optics topics that are not necessarily well represented in archive. And so we thought there was a need in our community to offer a preprint server option. So what we decided to do and worked with Archive for their agreement for us to build upon the success of Archive. And what we do is we expose the metadata to optics-related content in Optica Open. So as someone is searching for topic areas in their search results, they'll see listings from Archive. But of course, it points to the archive site, and we don't host those in Figshare. Our preprint server doesn't have a public commenting feature, but we did form a panel of Optica Open highlighters. So these are early career professionals in optics and photonics, and we asked them to, scan through the preprints on a regular basis, identify the ones that are of great interest to them, and write a little summary comment that we can post and promote. And we're excited about that and feel that there's a good opportunity to expand that program. So in looking at our numbers, again, we're fairly new, so these are cumulative numbers. We've had over 3,000 submissions, and we've posted over 2,400 preprints to Optica Open. So that equates to about 30 to 40 submissions per week now, and 20 to 25 that we're posting. These are still very small numbers compared to our journals program, where we receive 22,000 submissions a year for our journals, and we publish about 9,000 papers. So, we're not converting a lot of papers from our journals to preprints, but 74% of the preprints that we receive are coming through that journal submission channel. We're pleased with the engagement with articles on Optica Open. They're seeing about 780 views per article on average, which we think is good. I mentioned that we do rely on our journals for most of the submissions to Optica Open, and we still see optics content is still very popular in archive. So there's about 5 times more metadata submissions that we pull in from archive than what we receive to Optica Open right now. But at this point, we still feel it's worthwhile to have this service in our community. We've had the 54 highlights, and that's averaging a few per month. We do feel there's a lot of potential for us to expand this program further and engage these early career professionals and help promote the preprints that are of great interest to the community. So those are my comments about the highlights, and looking forward to answering further questions.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Kelly. All right, I would like to welcome Sam Hindle now from Open Archive.
Hi, thank you, Katie. So hi everyone, I'm Sam Hindle. I'm the Scientific Content Manager at bioRxiv and medRxiv. And so our servers are focusing on the life sciences for bioRxiv and the health sciences for medRxiv. And we receive around 6,000 manuscripts a month on bioRxiv and around 2,000 manuscripts on medRxiv. And our audience is essentially basic scientists for bioRxiv, and then biomedical and kind of clinicians for medRxiv. Our team is relatively small. There's 15 of us, but there's only around 6 of us managing the screening of those 6,000 manuscripts, but we do have some freelance screeners as well that help us, which I'll get to in a moment. But we also have around several hundred affiliate scientists who volunteer their time to help us screen those manuscripts as well. Next slide. So in terms of the numbers, we have currently across both bioRxiv and medRxiv more than 400,000 preprints. And of those, well, actually, around 65,000 of those were posted in 2025 alone. So we're certainly seeing a large corpus being submitted every year. And of those, around 25 to 30% are revised. So that's where the authors can submit a revised version. And we store all the different versions on the site, creating this transparent history of how the study has evolved over time. Something that we may come up later in the discussions is some of the reasons why authors post preprints, and the main one we find is that it increases awareness of their research, and that's a motivator to post preprints. And so what we see on bioRxiv and medRxiv is around 10 million views of the content across both sites per month. And that is actually one of the top reasons why authors specifically are choosing bioRxiv and medRxiv, because of that greater exposure that they receive. And you may be wondering what happens to those preprints after they're posted on the servers. So we found that around 80% of the papers do end up getting published in a journal as well. Next, please. So how do we manage those hundreds of manuscripts that we're receiving every day? It's kind of similar to the other preprint servers, and like Ben mentioned for ChemRxiv, we have a sort of basic screening check initially, which is performed by our freelance screeners. And then we have this higher level checks as well that are performed by one of many scientifically trained individuals, which is shown here by the affiliate screening step. As I mentioned, those affiliates are members of the community, and they really help to check that the manuscript is in fact research and that the conclusions won't cause harm to the public if the results turn out to be completely wrong. And we also run those manuscripts through Authenticate just like the other servers. Next, please. So here are just a few features that we have on our site that may be of interest to this community. In terms of some basic features, as you're probably aware, preprints have preprint DOIs. So we show that on the preprint page, as well as when the manuscript has been published in a journal. We also add the link to the version of record, which appears underneath the author list there. We also have our usage metrics available on every preprint page, so you can see how often it's been viewed and downloaded. We also show the history of the manuscript, so you can see all the different versions of that specific study, and again, creating that transparent history that you can look at. And we also display the HTML that we extract from the PDF itself, and that usually appears on the site within a day or two. And we actually use that HTML to create another version of the PDF that has the figures and the tables in line with the text. And that is available in the print save options over on the top right there underneath the download PDF. So that may be of interest to some people. Another sort of set of features that we have is trying to build sort of signals of trust around the preprint by highlighting any feedback through comments or reviews that the community or reviewing services have provided. We also mention any engagement with that preprint on blog posts or in the media, and we highlight that in that box, which we're calling the dashboard at the bottom right. And the last feature I want to highlight is that you can follow this preprint. So at the top there in blue, you can click on there and you can select various ways that you can be updated about changes with the preprint. So that could be if the author submits a revision, or maybe they have published the manuscript, or there's been some reviews added to the site. So you can select what you'd like to be updated on. So that's also a neat feature as well. Next. So I just wanted to talk about kind of where we are right now. And so with the way the climate is moving these days, we really need science to be rigorous, transparent, and accessible so that it can be trusted. Being freely available, preprints are already accessible across the world without paywalls. This helps to democratize access and bring more equity to how we're sharing scientific outputs. But another way that we can help address these issues of trust in science is through open and transparent reviews. So as I mentioned, we have this section on the site where we can show any reviews that have been associated with that preprint to help readers have more trust in the preprints themselves. Next, please. Another trust signal that we've developed are badges on the preprints. So we have a feature where authors can basically submit their preprint for assessment or curation by various third-party services. For the example shown here is Dryad, which is a data repository. And here, after the authors have submitted their manuscript to Dryad, they can check the underlying data and then add that badge as a signal of trust that it is fair, so findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. So we hope that these badges will also add a level of trust in preprints. Next, please. So finally, what is the future? We're hoping to create an open ecosystem where preprints provide the infrastructure for other services and evaluation approaches to build upon that. We're hoping that this allows the sharing of research outputs to be more flexible and to fit the community consuming those preprints, because that may vary from community to community. We're hoping that by focusing on the science rather than the business model, we can prioritize integrity, reliability, and responsible conduct of research, putting quality over quantity, and ensuring that assessment of research is measured over the long term rather than at a single point in time. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Sam, and everybody else. Hopefully this gives everyone some nice grounding for our discussion here. I have a few questions to kick off the discussion, but I do want to encourage the folks in attendance to please enter questions in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function and so on to ask questions, because we want this to be an interactive conversation. One other point to note is that I'll pose questions to the panelists, and we're not necessarily expecting that every panelist will answer every question. So hopefully that will keep things lively and not repetitive as well. Okay, so I think actually all of you addressed fairly well my initial question, which was about sort of the value of a preprint server for your community. I mean, all of you mentioned things like speed and being able to provide additional exposure for work and so on. Um, I see Dawn came back on camera. Thank you very much, Dawn. If the others can come back as well, that would be helpful. I think we're missing just one. Did we lose Ben?
It says the host needs to
Oh, there he is.
let me come back on. So
Oh,
okay, having
Ben
some
doesn't
time
have
out.
permission. Okay, he's set now. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so my first question to you all is going to be, building on the main topic of this webinar that we're doing today. Where are preprints going next? I mean, this is, I think, an exciting and interesting time for the preprints ecosystem. What are the big opportunities that you see? What are the potential opportunities that are not yet realized? So whoever would like to go first, you can just jump right in.
Maybe I'll go first because I'm the gadfly here, right? As I've warned you all. My answer to this question is very short. I think for IEEE, where preprints go next is very much an open question. There are some serious challenges in this space, but I know we're going to move into that discussion perhaps a little later. So I will yield the floor and let those who are maybe a little more positive on the future of preprints take this question.
Okay. Yes, let's stay in the happy positive side of things for a moment, and we'll definitely come back to the challenges.
Um,
Kelly, Sam, Ben, what do you say?
Sure. I was just going to say briefly that I think Sam highlighted one way that preprints can be used in the future, which is as this sort of collective pool of very new information that then you can take and build on in a number of different ways. And so I think that we see preprints still serving the needs that I mentioned, people wanting to establish priority for their results and have just sort of a way to share something that they are excited about as quickly as possible. But I think the untapped potential is how to kind of use that collective information since it is accessible. Um, Maybe the challenge being using it, understanding that it is not yet peer reviewed and that it is a wider and potentially messier collection of information than the journal published journal output. But I think there's cool things that can be done by people who are pulling through that information, combing through it, and using it programmatically even.
Yeah, I heard some interesting sort of early information, nothing super firm that I can share yet, but it was coming out of a funding program where they're requiring preprints of their grantees. And it's sort of a unique program where they have people, all within the same community, all working with this sort of common funder. The funder is holding them to a particular standard and asking them to share things. But one of the cool things you see within that community is that the preprints are starting to accelerate things. You're starting to see things move faster and the information is sharing. So I think it's partly preprints and also partly sort of the unique community that they have around this particular funder.
But I
Yeah.
think that's really exciting though, Katie, because like I feel like the stakeholders are really stepping up to try to promote and mandate preprinting. And as this new community of early career researchers is coming through and becoming more senior, I think we are seeing this shift in mentality, which I think we're at a really pivotal moment right now, particularly with everything that's going on, particularly here in America, in terms of restrictions to open science. I think we're at a point where we can really accelerate this further. And like when I think back to sort of 10 years ago when I was really starting to become an advocate for preprints, like back in 2016, I was still a postdoc then, and I was trying to tell people about preprints and they had no idea what that was. And now 10 years on, people generally know what preprints are. A lot of people are posting them. And I know we live in a bubble, but I feel like we're in a bigger bubble now than we were then. And that the narrative is starting to change from like what is a preprint and should we do it to like what can we do with it? Like how can we improve it? How can we add more trust to preprints? And where can we take it further? Like we very quickly got into this question, right, in this panel, rather than just like why should we do it in the first place? So I think that is really exciting. And one additional thing that we're doing at Open Archive, which is the home for bioRxiv and medRxiv, is this Open Archive Labs that we just announced like this week. And I think that's going to be a really exciting opportunity to create partnerships with big thinkers who are out there in the community who can build different tools that can help to add more trust signals, help to enhance preprints, how you read them, how you interact with them, and how you signal that trust, how you search for them, all of these things. And I just think that's going to be like a really interesting phase that we're moving into.
Absolutely. Kelly?
Yeah, I appreciated seeing the numbers of preprints that end up being converted to published papers, and it seems like it's a pretty high percentage, for you too, as it is for us. And so I think there's still people who are warming up to the idea of that, having the confidence of sharing their research before it's gone through that peer review stamp of approval. And so I think in some communities it may take a little bit longer for certain audiences to develop that. But we're curious and interested in exploring how to use preprints for tracking what's just going on in the field and in general, early indicators of emerging areas, and where the community is going could help us in providing other products and services for our community. So that's something I think we see as an opportunity.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Kelly, I thought that the program that you emphasized where you all are indexing the metadata from the archive preprints is itself very innovative and cool. Like I don't know of a ton of other publishers that are doing a similar thing, and I think it's a really nice way to demonstrate the sort of the value that preprints can add to the traditional publishing ecosystem, right? Like it's not the options are not just host your own preprint server or do nothing. There are these other options sort of in between where there's the opportunity to bring in that additional content in ways that serves the journal audience and the community in interesting ways.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Well, how about some of those challenges then? What are some of the big challenges that you all are seeing? I think there are plenty that we can talk about. Dawn, you seemed eager, so why don't you go ahead?
If I go first, then I, can stop talking. All right. So, I mean, I think the biggest challenge we have right now is really in the moderation space. So, particularly in screening for integrity issues like whole AI generated content, so things that are not reporting results of actual research. And interestingly, a bit of a spike in H-index hacking using preprint servers. So there's some bad behavior out there, and the intention of a preprint server is to be a light touch in the beginning. It's not peer review, it's moderation. So I think that we're adding more to the burden of moderation in trying to fight some of the not so ethical behavior that we're seeing in our preprint server. I mean, in addition, important to our volunteer leaders, there's a risk that a preprint could contain perhaps intentionally misleading information that could be amplified through social media. We've seen that happen. And they are concerned that that weakens public trust in science, which runs directly against our mission to benefit humanity. Lately we've seen in the press preprint servers stop accepting new submissions or close. Others have moved to restrict who can submit or what types of content they'll accept. So, I mean, I think IEEE is at a crossroads right now, meaning that we are having serious conversations with our volunteer leadership about whether we can or should continue to offer TechRxiv as a service to our community. I think that I can give you at least one fact that kind of supports or illustrates the problem we're having in moderation. We were seeing before we switched platforms, and so we're on a temporary hiatus while we work out some technical details, but we were seeing about 1,600 submissions per month. And we were rejecting fully half of them. And I think that in a preprint server, your acceptance rate should be much higher than that, right? You're looking to be inclusive. You're looking to essentially give a home to anything that is a legitimate scientific effort, but isn't peer reviewed, right? So we shouldn't have to reject 50% of the submissions that we're getting. So that's where we're focused right now and where we see the challenges, and it is causing some real pause among our volunteer leaders about whether at this point we're doing more harm than good in continuing the service. No decisions have been made, but those are the discussions we're having.
Yeah, thanks. That certainly does sound challenging, and I should say at this point that I'm involved as a volunteer with the preprint server. My background's in psychology, so I volunteer with ChemRxiv, and we've seen some of the same kinds of challenges, not quite on the scale that you just mentioned, but I'm sure we'll ask the others. I think seems to be sort of a industry-wide issue that we're experiencing right now, and not particular to any particular area. I do want to get to other challenges, but maybe let's stay with this one for a moment and just get some reactions from others on the panel. How are you seeing this particular issue showing up in your servers? What kinds of things are you doing to address it? What seems to be working? What's not working?
On our side, again, our numbers are small, and so it is a lot easier to manage it and to kind of stay on top of these issues, and it hasn't become overwhelming. I think if we were seeing, kind of an exponential growth in submissions, that would be deeply concerning, because most likely the reason for it would be, how easy it is to generate, new papers with AI or paper mills. So we don't think that that's happening yet, but we have had instances of, as you were talking about, the H-index manipulation, where people are a lot of self-citations in the preprints. And then we had submissions where, someone would cite 80 papers, in one reference block. And then when you look at that, there's a lot of self-citations in that. Now, that's not something that would ever be accepted in a journal. But people feel like they can get away with it in a preprint. So we started clamping down on that, and that's why we check if for single author submissions, just to make sure it looks like it's someone we can vouch for in some way. And are there any large citation blocks, in the preprint? And then the other, maybe I'll save the other challenge for for other discussion, but for the integrity, those are the main ones that we're seeing right now.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, just to add a little note, we are seeing some challenges, but again, not at the scale I think that Dawn was mentioning. I think for us, the challenge is because we're manually checking all of these things. So it invests a lot of our time in checking the references and whether this author exists and, all these types of things. But I think that is a key place where, and this may be what we get onto next, where technology can help. Because that self-citation, over-citing certain authors, all of these types of things can be flagged very easily with tools. And so if just like we use Authenticate to check for plagiarism, if we can integrate other tools that can help us spot those issues, and then we just lightweight check things, that I think can speed up a lot of things. And then the signal, I think, would get out there to the community that there's no point in submitting these things because we're going to see them and we're not going to accept them. So hopefully over time, that signal would get out there, and having clear, transparent policies around that would hopefully make that better for the community as well.
Yeah. Dawn, is your team doing manual checks at this point as well, or do you have any other sort of tools that you're able to deploy?
All right, so we use Authenticate like everybody else does, but one of the things that we're discussing is there are tools out there, AI-enabled tools that can help to spot behavior like high self-citation rates. AI-generated content's a little tough, but there are patterns to look for, like Kelly mentioned. Single author preprints are a pretty serious red flag for us. But we're starting to now talk about a service we're offering for free that is already not without cost, and adding these tools on top and beefing up on the staff that we would need to run and review the results of the tools adds a significant overhead, right? So the question becomes, what is the math there? Is it worth adding that extra cost? And actually the discussion started partly because I said to the board, I either have to invest in this process or we have to do something different. And that's kind of where the discussion started and where it continues.
Thanks very much. Ben, any thoughts?
I'm just gonna be that person that says I echo a lot of what's been said already. We're not seeing nearly the scale that Dawn is seeing. We still are able to post, over 90% of what we receive. And however, we have seen that slice that we're having to decline has been increasing over the past 6 months or so. And we're seeing some of the same behaviors that have been mentioned here. So at the same time, we are also having conversations around, what can we use technology for so that we can save, and just enable more rapid screening and flag things that need to get escalated for that deeper look, but keep things moving along as quickly as we can, because it is a cost. It is something that we have to weigh among the other elements of our budget and the things that we want to build and how we want to move forward.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to say something. I think that maybe we're not saying as much in public because we don't want to say too much about sort of the details of what this problem looks like. But I think when people think about AI generated content in this area, they're thinking about sort of the ordinary ways that researchers might be using this kind of information. So maybe they're using it to improve their text, or maybe they're generating figures, or I don't know, helping with a reference list, what have you. The kinds of content that we're rejecting at ChemRxiv, and probably it's similar to what you guys are seeing, is visible almost immediately as like nonsense word salad. And so one of the interesting things I think about anyways is what happens as that content sort of matures and it starts to look less distinguishable from the regular science that's coming out. Like right now we can, even though it's adding additional resources to check it and flag this stuff and weed it out, you can do it. But yeah, what does happen eventually down the line when it becomes harder to see?
Yeah, and it is a manual. Yes, you can spot it, but it's a manual process, right?
Certainly.
And
Yeah, time consuming.
to have AI generate a review or survey paper is pretty easy, and you might not spot it, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'll open the floor for other challenges, other things that are affecting the industry that we need to be thinking about.
I'll throw one out that's seems like a kind of a jump down in magnitude of like importance here, but is exchange of metadata. So like preprints, especially with each individual platform being hosted kind of separately, exchange of information so that like we know when the paper's actually been published. Like we want to put a link up so readers can find that research. If that gets retracted or if ours gets withdrawn, like having that sort of collective interface. And I've been on a working group with Crossref for a long time now about how we could potentially provide more metadata and exchange information more readily, and it's just super slow going. And so I do think that again, as we get to this world where technology is just leaps and bounds better than it was even 3 years ago, there may be solutions out there that can layer on really nicely, but for the moment, it does feel like you have to do a lot of like individual sending of information or integrate this new tool or integrate this one thing, and that becomes also costly and time consuming when we're operating on a team of me and our contract moderators, right? So just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, metadata is probably no one's favorite topic except for mine. I love metadata. I think it sort of makes the whole world go round. So, I mean, we could talk about metadata for hours from my point of view, but from your point of view, Ben, does the adoption of a new platform open doors with respect to solving this problem, or is it just sort of, I guess, new challenges, new ways to pass the information around?
I think for us, when we did move earlier this year to Wiley's Research Exchange preprints platform, and they do seem a little more in touch with, so let's say structuring the information that we do have, passing that through with the Crossref DOI request so that there is an abstract and information, that not just the very basic information, but it still doesn't mean that when the sort of larger things happen out in the world that they remember ChemRxiv and that there's an exchange. For instance, like I said, when we get alerted by an author that their paper's been published, the titles may be different, we'll put a link up and then that just sits there, right? There's no actual way for us to even send that information to Crossref at this point so that they know that there's a link between the two if they didn't find it already. So little things like that just feel like we could do better to support and to link together all the information about that. Think of it as an element of that same research story alongside of its data, alongside of maybe a conference paper that relates to it. Like tying that all together seems like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of the different platforms, all of the different servers, I should say, make choices about the kinds of information to display to users, but then that's a wholly sort of separate thing from the information that gets passed back to that record that becomes integrated with other systems. And I think because preprints are often done on this sort of shoestring budget without, the additional supports that you get from other kinds of ScalComm infrastructure, that it gets overlooked that you don't have this sort of additional way to get that metadata back into the record. Yeah, such an important point. All right, well, we should open the door for audience questions if there are any. So let's get some of those in while I'll ask another question here while we are waiting for those.
Hey, Katie, Catherine Green has her hand up.
Oh, yes, sorry. Catherine, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everybody, for your expertise in this. I really appreciate it. A colleague of mine and I, at our institution, we do teach a preprint workshop to kind of help our researchers get maybe more comfortable with preprints, or at least, so I guess we're more, what we talk about is a little bit more on the beginner side of things, because we just are literally just trying to get them to understand what a preprint is. One of the things that I guess Ben was talking about just moments ago about different like on a shoestring budget, or the number of people being responsible for a mountain of preprints and metadata. Is that sort of why if a what am I trying to say? If a preprint has actually been like not published, they haven't been published, they've been rejected, and it just says rejected, but it still stays on the preprint site. Is that usually why it's there, or is it more for like ethical purposes to be like, no, this was written, it was just rejected, so we have a note here, because we do get concerned faculty who are like, I want to post a preprint or use whichever platform, but if something occurs and I've been rejected from the journal, and that's going to just sit there in the preprint channel, that sort of turns them off.
Sure.
So I just put that out there as a question.
Yeah, let me see if I can take a stab at it, and then I'll invite anybody else to chime in who'd like to. So preprints are, I think, across all services viewed as a permanent part of the scholarly record. And so that means that once a paper is posted, it doesn't come down. The exceptions to this are for very serious ethical issues, or, other kinds of, later discovered plagiarism or misconduct or things like that. Preprints can be withdrawn, it's called, rather than retracted, but it's sort of similar to a retraction. Usually those withdrawals are replaced with some kind of notice similar to a retraction notice that explains the removal of the paper. But otherwise, the postings are meant to be permanent. Another distinction is that at some services are closely associated with a particular commercial publisher, and then others are not tied to any particular publisher. So we've kind of heard some of that from the different panelists here. Some of the services, like there's a service called Research Square, which is owned by Springer Nature. They will offer a service that's called In Review that will tell you whether or not a paper is being considered at a particular title. But later, if the paper is rejected, I don't think they get labeled rejected. They just are no longer listed as being in review or under review with that particular title anymore. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know if others have
Yeah,
things.
I was just going to add that, yeah, we as at bioRxiv and medRxiv, because we're not tied to any journal, we have no idea whether a manuscript has been rejected from a journal or not. And so nothing changes on the site when your manuscript is rejected from a journal. It just stays as it was. And we also don't signal what journal it's being considered by either. And we have strict policies also, even in terms of comments that come in that might mention the journal that it was submitted to, and here are the reviews from that journal. And we have policies that essentially don't allow that because it's the author's decision whether to disclose that, not us. So in that regard, there would be no indicator of it ever being submitted to a journal or rejected from a journal. But we do have withdrawals, like Katie mentioned, and that is usually either author initiated if they found issues with their manuscript and they want to flag for the community that they're undergoing some revisions, they're redoing experiments, and they just want the community to know that they shouldn't cite this paper for those results because those results might not be entirely accurate or certain aspects are not entirely accurate. So that is author driven. The only time that we as the servers would withdraw something is if we find something more serious. So like if there was an ethical issue, we had an institution, for example, might contact us and say there were some issues with this manuscript, like unethical behavior, then we would withdraw that manuscript. But again, the manuscript is still available and there's a disclaimer as to why it was withdrawn, and it would not happen otherwise. So yeah, I just wanted to be clear on that.
I would just make a quick point that the fundamental question of whether preprint should be considered a permanent part of the scholarly record is part of the discussion going on at IEEE right now.
Oh, fascinating. Can you say a little more about that?
It's a preliminary discussion, but basically it's they're not peer reviewed. They're not in any way validated, right? So maybe they shouldn't be around forever. Maybe they should just be temporary. But the fact that we're assigning DOIs to them gives us an obligation to make them a permanent part of the record. So that the whole premise of the status of a preprint and does it serve science to keep preprints that never go anywhere basically available in the scholarly record is what we're discussing.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly tricky because as soon as that DOI exists, people can reference it. And then what do you do? Not only if the DOI doesn't resolve, but sort of what is that reference pointing to if that original thing is withdrawn? Sam, did you want to add something?
Yeah, could I just go and just as an example during COVID, so everything was changing so rapidly with the various strains that were coming out. There were a lot of journals who were not reviewing papers because the news was kind of old by the time it would actually get published. But it's important that those manuscripts remain. And so in some respects, are we punishing the authors by removing that manuscript because it never got published? It's still useful information and it was still cited. And so then if it's cited and then it's removed, there's basically a broken link and no access to that information. So I would challenge that thought a little bit, but I do see where you're coming from. But I think there are a lot of negatives to removing the preprints themselves.
There's questions about matching as well. Matching the preprints one-to-one to a final paper is actually trickier than it looks at first blush, especially given that, papers can get split, divided, or, different branches abandoned and so on. So it's very tricky to sort of map things from the beginning. I think we have a question from Tony. Please go ahead.
Hi everyone. I'm Tony O'Rourke from Inago. We make tools that help screen content like this. It's not the reason for my question. My background is in physics publishing. I worked in physics publishing for 15 years. And in physics publishing, archive, in certain areas, archive was kind of the default. It was the go-to area. If you're a high energy physicist, a cosmo particle physicist, you were using archive. Archive was the first thing you looked at and the last thing you looked at. The journals were kind of noise in a sense. I'm curious what the panel thinks about why different communities behave in such a way that preprints aren't necessarily seen with that same level of importance. And what can we do to influence that?
Great question. Anyone
Thank
want
you.
to take it up?
I think it may have something to do with the pace of discovery and results in certain communities. And so when there's fast pace and a lot of intense competition, then I think that can make preprints very attractive because of that priority, as was mentioned before. But you know, it is interesting because most people do want to have that journal stamp of approval, and you know, when it comes to impact factor and things like that. So yeah, the particle physics has been really unique that way.
It has. I mean, the impact factors and journal brands, all in some areas, just don't count for anything.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was before like archive launched, I believe there was already a behavior of authors kind of sharing their manuscripts a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
anyway,
So,
and so maybe that's just not been in the culture for biomedicine, for example, in the same to the same degree as it was in physics, and so it just seemed very natural to have a digital way of doing that
yeah,
in
yeah.
the era of the internet, and so maybe that helped it get set in that mindset for archive from the beginning because it was just
No,
natural.
you're
But it's
absolutely right. I mean,
not natural in biomedicine, so we have to, if that's the where we want to go, it requires a lot more education and resetting of the mindset
yeah.
around that. But sorry, Tony, go ahead. I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
no, you've answered my question. Physicists have been doing this since the 1930s, you know, sending each other 20, 30 copies of their papers and getting feedback. And then in 1990, or whatever it was, Paul Ginspark did his thing and just systemized the whole thing. So, yeah, it's absolutely right.
Ben, go ahead.
I was just going to add that I think in some cases for certain fields of physics and astronomy and math, someone else might not have the same bubble chamber set up. Like you can send that out and not be worried that they're going to immediately replicate the experiment. And I think in a lot of fields of chemistry, that's not the case. If you hand someone a synthesis thing, they can crank it out and do it. And so we have fought against the perception that people would do that in the field of chemistry, even if they really aren't. And over the past couple of years, we've started to see that people actually understand that a preprint can protect them from being scooped, as opposed to enabling them to be scooped. But that was sort of the early feedback in our field was very much, well, someone's going to read it and just redo it, because you know a lot of what's going on is sort of a race to come up with new molecules and patterns and compounds that could then be patented or monetized, and that definitely makes it harder in chemistry.
And
I
I
will
think
say one of the things across fields is that, you know, time is of the essence for early career researchers, and I think that's why we see so much uptake among those early career scholars. Sam, sorry to cut you off, but I do need to turn it back over to Howard to wrap us up. Thanks, everyone, and it's been a really great conversation.
So thanks, everyone. That was a great session. A lot for us all to think about, and a huge thank you to Katie and the panelists, and of course our attendees who are asking lots of great questions. And once again, we want to thank let me just share this. Want to thank our sponsors, AIP Publishing and STM, for sponsoring this event. And enjoy the rest of your week, everyone.
Bye, thanks.
Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Thank you.